My own son David and his wife Rachel stole my life. They took my home, my money, my trust, and left me standing on the porch of the house I'd built with my own hands, holding just a single bag. They told me to leave, said it was their house now. Betrayed at 68, thrown out like an old coat. Would I let them win, or would I find a way to take back what was mine? Subscribe and let me know where you're reading from. Let's dive into this story together. I'm Miriam, and that sunny afternoon broke my world. The sky was blue, the kind of blue that makes you think everything's right, but nothing was right. My little house, with its creaky porch and rose garden, was my heart. I'd planted those roses the year David was born, red and pink blooms that climbed the fence. Every summer, I'd sit on the porch, sipping tea, watching them sway. That house wasn't just walls and a roof, it was my life. After my husband Tom passed 10 years ago, it was all I had left. Me and the roses, we kept each other company. David was my only child. I raised him alone after Tom got sick. I worked 2 jobs, cleaning houses by day, sewing clothes by night, to pay for his school, his soccer games, his dreams. I never complained. Seeing him smile was enough. He grew up, got married to Rachel, a sharp-eyed woman with big plans. At first I liked her. She was polite, brought me flowers, called me mom, but over time her smiles felt thin, like paper stretched too tight. 2 years ago, they came to me with an idea. I was in my kitchen, baking bread, the smell of yeast warm in the air. David sat at the table, his hands folded, looking serious. Rachel stood by the window, her arms crossed. "Mom," David said, "we've been thinking, you're not getting younger. What if something happens? We should put the house and your savings in our names. It's safer that way." Rachel nodded, her voice smooth. "We'll take care of you, Miriam. You won't have to worry about bills or taxes. It's for your own good." I looked at David, searching his eyes. They were the same eyes I'd kissed goodnight when he was small. I trusted him. I loved him. So I said yes. We went to a lawyer's office, a cold room with too many papers. I signed where they pointed. My hand shook a little, but I thought, they're family. They'll do right by me. For a while things seemed fine. I lived in my house, tended my roses, cooked my meals, but then small things changed. Rachel stopped coming over for Sunday dinners. David called less, always rushing, saying he was busy. When they did visit, they'd walk through the house, looking at the walls, the windows like they were measuring it. Once, I caught Rachel taking photos of my living room, just for ideas, she said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Then came the whispers. One evening, I was in the garden, pulling weeds, when I heard them talking through the open window. "We could get a good price for this place," Rachel said, her voice low. "Maybe move to the city, start fresh." David mumbled something I couldn't hear, but it sounded like agreement. My heart stopped. Sell my house, the house I'd paid for, the house where I'd raised David, where Tom and I had danced in the kitchen. I stood there, dirt on my hands, feeling like the ground was slipping away. I didn't say anything that night. I couldn't. My throat was tight, my chest heavy. I went to bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying their words. The next morning, I checked my bank account at the post office. The clerk, a kind man named Mr. Patel, frowned at the screen. "Miriam, your savings, there's not much left." I felt dizzy. Thousands of dollars, money I'd saved for years, were gone, moved to accounts I didn't know. I went home and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the papers they'd made me sign. I didn't understand all the words, but I knew I'd been tricked. David and Rachel weren't protecting me, they were taking everything. I thought of my roses, how I'd cared for them, how they'd bloomed even in hard times. I'd cared for David the same way, but he'd turned on me, my own son. That's when they told me to leave. It was a Tuesday, warm and bright. David came alone, his face hard. "Mom," he said, "we're selling the house. You can't stay here. We found you a place, a nice apartment." He handed me a key and an address, like it was a gift. I stared at him, waiting for the boy I'd raised to show up, but he was gone. "You'll be fine," he said, then left. I packed a bag, some clothes, a photo of Tom, my mother's old Bible. I stood on the porch looking at my roses one last time. Rachel's car pulled up. She didn't get out, just waved like I was a stranger. I walked to the bus stop, my bag heavy, my heart heavier. The apartment was small, with thin walls and a leaky faucet. I sat on the bed, alone, and cried. But crying doesn't fix things. That night I wiped my eyes and made a promise. They thought I was weak, an old woman they could push aside. They were wrong. I started watching them, quiet as a shadow. I noticed how Rachel left papers on the counter, how David forgot to lock his phone. I heard their plans, selling my house, moving my money. I didn't know how yet, but I'd stop them. I found a library card in my purse and went the next day. Miss Clara, the librarian, showed me how to use the computer. I looked up my bank accounts, saw the money trails. I found David's old laptop in a box they'd left behind. It still worked, and his email was open. I read messages between him and Rachel, talking about taking over Mom's assets. My hands shook, but I printed everything. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was angry. They'd betrayed me, but I wasn't done. I had a plan, a spark of defiance growing stronger every day. They'd taken my home, but I'd take it back. And when I did, they'd learn what happens when you cross a woman who's got nothing left to lose. The apartment they sent me to was small and sad. One window let in gray light, and the bed creaked every time I moved. A wobbly table sat in the corner, holding my cup of tea and a notebook where I wrote my thoughts. Every night I lay awake picturing my house, my rose garden, the kitchen where I'd baked cookies for David, the porch where I'd watched the stars. David and Rachel didn't visit. They didn't call. They thought they'd won. But I wasn't giving up. I was planning. I started small. Each morning I walked to the library, my shoes tapping on the sidewalk. Miss Clara, the librarian with kind eyes, became my friend. She showed me how to use the computer better. "Miriam, you're a quick learner," she said, smiling. I didn't tell her why I needed to learn. I just nodded and kept working. On the computer, I checked my bank accounts. Most of my money was gone, moved to strange accounts with names I didn't know. I wrote down every detail in my notebook, dates, amounts, account numbers. My hands were steady, but my heart hurt. One day I found David's old laptop in a box they'd left at my old house. I'd taken it with me when they made me leave, thinking it might be useful. It was dusty, but it turned on. David hadn't changed his password. It was still his birthday. I felt a pang remembering how I'd celebrated his birthdays with cakes and balloons. I pushed the memory away and opened his email. There were messages between him and Rachel. One said, "The lawyer says we can take over Mom's assets soon." Another talked about selling my house for a big profit. I read each word, my stomach twisting. They weren't just taking my home, they were erasing me. I printed the emails, my hands shaking. Miss Clara helped me without asking questions. "Need more paper," she said, passing me a stack. I smiled, grateful for her quiet kindness. Back at my apartment, I hid the papers in a shoebox under my bed. I wasn't sure what to do with them yet, but I knew they were important. Next, I went to the county office, a big building with long hallways. I wore my best dress, the blue one Tom always liked, to feel brave. At the counter, I asked to see the deed to my house. The clerk, a young man with glasses, pulled it up on his computer. The deed said the house belonged to David and Rachel now, but I noticed something strange. My signature on the paper wasn't right. The M in Miriam had funny loops, not the straight lines I always made. I stared at it, my heart racing. They'd forged my name. "Everything okay?" the clerk asked. I smiled, hiding my shock. "Yes, thank you," I said, but my mind was spinning. A forged signature was proof they'd lied, proof they'd stolen. I walked home clutching a copy of the deed in my purse. That night, I added it to my shoebox, along with the bank records and emails. My plan was coming together, piece by piece. I knew I needed help. I couldn't fight David and Rachel alone. At the library, Miss Clara gave me a phone number for a lawyer named Mr. Thompson. "He helps people like you," she said. I called him from a payphone, not wanting David to see my number on his phone bill. Mr. Thompson's voice was calm and strong. I told him everything, how I'd signed papers, how my money was gone, how my house was in their names. I told him about the forged signature. "Miriam," he said, "this sounds like fraud. If you have evidence, we can fight this." The word fraud felt like a key unlocking a door. Fraud meant they'd broken the law. Fraud meant I could stop them. "What do?" I asked. He told me to keep gathering proof, more papers, more emails, anything showing what they'd done. Be careful, he said. Don't let them know you're watching. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Careful was all I'd been. Every step felt like walking on thin ice. If David or Rachel found out, they'd cut me off completely. They might sell the house faster, or hide the money where I'd never find it. But I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry. Angry at David for turning his back on me. Angry at Rachel for her cold smiles. Angry at myself for trusting them. That night, I sat at my wobbly table, my notebook open. I wrote down every clue I had, the forged deed, the missing money, the emails about selling my house. I drew a line under the list and wrote one word: justice. I didn't know exactly how I'd get it, but I knew I would. They thought they could push me out, leave me with nothing. They didn't know I was watching, waiting, building a trap they'd never see coming. I closed my notebook and looked out the window. The street was dark, but a single street light glowed. It reminded me of the spark inside me, small but steady. I wasn't the weak old woman they thought I was. I was Miriam, who'd raised a son alone, who'd built a home, who'd survived loss. I'd survived this too, and when I was done, David and Rachel would learn what happens when you betray someone who loves you. I woke up every morning with a fire in my chest. My tiny apartment, with its leaky faucet and thin walls, felt like a cage, but I wasn't trapped. I was building something, a plan to take back my house, my money, my life. David and Rachel thought they'd won, thought I'd given up. They didn't know I was watching them, collecting every clue, waiting for the right moment to strike. I decided to play a part. I called David one sunny afternoon, making my voice soft and sweet, like I used to when he was little. "Can I come see the house?" I asked. He paused, his voice tight. "Why, Mom?" he said. I laughed, light as air. "Just to see you both, maybe have tea like old times." He mumbled something about being busy, but finally said yes. I hung up, my heart pounding. They couldn't suspect I was onto them. The next day, I walked to my old house, my purse heavy with my notebook and a small camera I'd bought at the thrift store. My roses greeted me first, but they looked sad, their petals drooping. Nobody had watered them. I wanted to grab a hose right then, but I couldn't. I had to stay focused. Rachel opened the door, her smile sharp like a knife. "Miriam," she said, not even calling me Mom anymore. "Come in." Inside, my house felt wrong. New furniture filled the living room, fancy chairs and a glass table that didn't fit. The walls had bright paintings I'd never seen. My cozy home was gone, replaced by something cold. David came downstairs, his eyes darting away from mine. "Want tea?" he asked, but it felt like a chore, not kindness. I nodded, smiling, playing the part of a sweet old lady. While Rachel boiled water, I wondered, pretending to admire their changes. In the kitchen, I saw a stack of papers on the counter, bills, letters, and something that looked like a contract. My heart jumped. When Rachel turned to grab cups, I slipped one paper into my purse. It was a bank statement, showing thousands of dollars moved to a new account. My money. I kept my face calm, sipping tea, chatting about the weather, but inside, I was buzzing. I visited again a week later. This time I brought cookies, saying I'd baked them for them. Rachel raised an eyebrow but took them. While they ate, I excused myself to the bathroom. On the way, I passed David's study. His phone was on the desk, screen lit up. I glanced at the door, heard their voices in the kitchen, and took a chance. I grabbed the phone and scrolled. There was a text from Rachel to someone named Mark that said, "House sale finalizes next month. We're set." I snapped a photo with my camera, my hands steady despite my racing heart. Each visit gave me more. I found a real estate contract tucked in a drawer, listing my house for sale. I saw an email on Rachel's tablet, left open by mistake, about moving money before she notices. Every clue went into my shoebox under the bed, growing heavier with their lies. I felt like a detective, piecing together a puzzle, but every clue also hurt. This was my son, the boy I'd sung to sleep, now stealing from me. I kept Mr. Thompson, the lawyer, updated. I met him at his office, a small room with books stacked high. I showed him the bank statement, the contract, the photo of the text. His eyes widened. "Miriam, this is strong evidence," he said. "We can prove fraud, but we need to move fast before they sell the house." That night he called me. "We're ready," he said. "File the fraud report tomorrow, and it will freeze their accounts and stop the house sale." but are you sure? This will hit them hard. I sat on my creaky bed, staring at the shoebox. I thought of my roses, my kitchen, my life. I thought of David's cold eyes, Rachel's sharp smile. I'm sure, I said. I barely slept that night. My mind raced, picturing what would happen. Would David be angry? Would Rachel cry? Part of me still loved my son, hoped he'd say he was sorry, but another part, the stronger part, knew he'd made his choice. They'd betrayed me, pushed me out, taken everything. Now I'd show them I wasn't invisible. The morning of the report, I put on my blue dress, the one Tom loved. It felt like armor. I walked to the police station, my shoebox under my arm. My steps were slow but sure. I wasn't just fighting for my house, I was fighting for myself. David and Rachel thought they could bury me. They didn't know I'd been watching, waiting, ready to spring a trap that would change their lives forever. The police station smelled like coffee and old paper. My hands gripped my shoebox, filled with the evidence I'd collected: bank statements, forged deeds, emails, and photos. My blue dress felt like a shield, but my heart pounded as I walked to the counter. I was about to turn David and Rachel's world upside down. They'd taken my home, my money, my trust. Now I'd take it all back. Officer Lopez, a woman with warm eyes and a neat braid, listened as I explained. My son and his wife stole my house, I said, my voice steady. They forged my name, moved my money, and kicked me out. I opened the shoebox and spread out the papers. Her eyes widened as she read the emails, saw the fake signature on the deed, and flipped through the bank statements. "This is serious, Miriam," she said. "We'll open an investigation right away." I nodded, my throat tight. "What happens next?" I asked. She explained that filing the fraud report would freeze David and Rachel's bank accounts and stop the sale of my house. "It'll hit them fast," she said. "They won't expect it." I thanked her and walked home, my steps lighter. The trap was set, and now it was sprung. By noon, it started. Mr. Thompson called to say the bank had frozen their accounts. The real estate agent couldn't move forward with the house sale. I didn't call David or Rachel. I didn't need to. That evening, my apartment's buzzer rang, sharp and loud. I opened the door, and there was David, his face red, his eyes wild. "What did you do, Mom?" he shouted. "Our accounts are frozen. We can't pay for anything." I stood tall, my voice calm. "I protected what's mine," I said. He stared, like he didn't know me. "You're ruining us," he yelled. I didn't flinch. "You ruined yourself," I said, then closed the door. My hands shook, but I felt strong. For the first time in months, I wasn't the one running. Rachel called an hour later, her voice high and panicked. "Miriam, please, fix this. We didn't mean to hurt you." I listened to her cry, but her words felt empty. She hadn't cared when they took my house, when they left me in that tiny apartment. I hung up without speaking. They thought tears would change my mind. They were wrong. The next few days were loud. Reporters knocked on my door, asking about the widow who fought back. I didn't want to talk. I wasn't doing this for attention. I wanted justice. Mr. Thompson filed a lawsuit to get my house and money back. He said the evidence was strong, but David and Rachel wouldn't give up easily. They hired a lawyer, a man in a shiny suit who called me, offering to settle. "They'll give you some money," he said, "if you drop the case." I laughed. "I want my home," I said, and hung up. David and Rachel's lawyer sent papers claiming I'd gifted them the house and money. It was a lie, but it scared me for a moment. What if the judge believed them? Mr. Thompson patted my hand. "Your evidence is solid," he said. "The forged signature, the emails, they can't explain those away." I nodded, holding on to his words like a lifeline. While the lawsuit grew, I found a new place to feel safe. The community center down the street had a group for older women. I went one rainy afternoon, nervous, clutching my purse. The room was warm, filled with laughter and stories. Women like me sat in a circle, sharing their lives. One had lost her savings to a bad son-in-law. Another had been pushed out of her family's business. They listened to my story, their eyes kind but fierce. "You're strong, Miriam," said a woman named Ellen, her hair white as snow. "Keep fighting." We met every week, sharing coffee and courage. Ellen taught me to knit, her hands guiding mine. Another woman, Rosa, brought homemade tamales and told me about her own fight to keep her home. These women weren't just friends, they were my strength. They reminded me I wasn't alone. That betrayal didn't break me, but David and Rachel weren't done. One night, I got a letter slid under my door. It was from David, handwritten, the first time he'd written me in years. "Mom," it said, "we're sorry, let's talk, we can fix this." My heart twisted. Part of me wanted to believe him, to see my little boy again, but I read the letter twice, noticing how he didn't say what he was sorry for. It felt like another trick. I called Mr. Thompson and showed him the letter. "They're scared," he said. "They know the evidence is against them. Don't meet them alone." I nodded, folding the letter into my shoebox. The fight wasn't over. David and Rachel had one last move, and I had to be ready. My roses, my home, my life, they were waiting for me, and I was ready to take them back, no matter what came next. The courtroom was cold, with hard wooden benches and a tall ceiling that made my voice feel small. I sat on one side, my hands folded, my shoebox of evidence next to me. Across the room, David and Rachel sat with their lawyer, a man in a shiny suit who whispered to them. They didn't look at me. My heart ached, but I pushed it down. Today wasn't about feelings, it was about truth. I'd come too far to back down now. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, called the room to order. Mr. Thompson stood, his voice clear as he explained my case. "Miriam trusted her son and daughter-in-law," he said. "They betrayed her, forging her signature, stealing her money, and taking her home." He held up the papers from my shoebox, the forged deed, the bank statements, the emails, the photo of Rachel's text about selling the house. Each one felt like a brick in the wall I'd built against their lies. David's lawyer stood next. He was smooth, his words slippery. "Miriam gave her son the house willingly," he said. "She's older now, confused, maybe forgetting things." My face burned. Confused. I'd spent months gathering evidence, outsmarting them. I wanted to shout, but Mr. Thompson touched my arm. "Wait," he whispered. "We'll have our turn." David went to the stand. He looked smaller than I remembered, his shoulders hunched. "Mom wanted us to have the house," he said, his voice low. "She said it was a gift." He glanced at me, and for a second I saw the boy I'd raised, the one who'd hugged me tight after nightmares. But then I remembered his cold words on my porch, telling me to leave. That boy was gone. Rachel spoke next, her voice shaky. "We were helping her," she said. "She didn't understand the papers." The judge's eyes narrowed, and I felt a spark of hope. Rachel's words didn't match the emails, the texts, the forged signature. Lies can't stand up to truth forever. Then it was my turn. I walked to the stand, my blue dress neat, my steps steady. The courtroom was quiet, every eye on me. I took a breath and spoke. "This house was my life," I said. "I built it with my husband, raised my son there, planted roses that still bloom. David and Rachel tricked me. They said it was for my safety, but they forged my name, took my money and told me to leave." I held up the deed, pointing to the fake signature. "This isn't mine. They stole from me." I showed the judge the emails, the bank statements, the text about the house sale. My voice didn't shake. "I trusted my son," I said. "He betrayed me, but I'm not weak. I'm here to take back what's mine." The room was silent when I finished. Mr. Thompson smiled, and even Officer Lopez, sitting in the back, nodded. The judge took a long time looking at the papers. She asked David questions, then Rachel. Their answers stumbled, tripping over each other. "Why did you move her money without telling her?" the judge asked. Rachel mumbled about helping. David said nothing. The judge's face was hard, like stone. Finally she spoke. "The evidence is clear," she said. "The deed was forged. The transfers were illegal. The house and money belonged to Miriam." My heart leaped. She ordered the house returned to my name, and the money restored. David and Rachel would face fines, maybe more if the fraud investigation found worse. I closed my eyes, breathing deep. I'd won. Outside the courtroom, David tried to talk. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said, his voice soft. I looked at him, searching for the boy I loved, but all I saw was the man who'd pushed me out. "You made your choice," I said, and walked away. Rachel stood by their car, crying, but I didn't stop. My heart was heavy, but my head was high. I went back to my house that week. The roses were still there, wilted but alive. I watered them, my hands gentle, and they started to bloom again, red and pink against the fence. The community center women came to help. bringing food and laughter. Ellen knitted me a scarf. Rosa planted new flowers with me. They were my family now, stronger than the one I'd lost. Sitting on my porch, sipping tea, I looked at the stars. I'd been betrayed, pushed down, but I'd stood up. My house was mine again, my roses were blooming and my heart was healing. David and Rachel had tried to take everything, but they couldn't take me. I was Miriam, and I was strong.